there's been a growing narrative for the New York Giants and how they should handle this upcoming offseason. There is, and some New York media have been pushing this, Colin Cowherd's been pushing this, it's been gaining steam that Jaxson Dart, their current quarterback, should be traded if the Giants hold the first overall pick at the end of the season. Or even if they're in a position to draft a quarterback, they should trade Jaxson Dart and they should select Dante Moore, or particularly Fernando Mendoza has been the one who's brought up with this. As somebody who's a Giants fan, as somebody who covers the Giants, I am completely against this. We have spent time talking about here, I mean, you quite literally have said Mendoza is a Jared Goff type prospect. That to me is not enough of a leap forward to consider moving on from Jaxson Dart. If you are effectively in a position to draft somebody who is an otherworldly quarterback prospect, like an Andrew Luck, absolutely have the consideration, absolutely do your due diligence. My problem with this is that you finally have a kid who not only has shown massive big plays, high impact on putting this team in a position to compete, to potentially win games that you're not supposed to, with significant limitations, with a below average offensive line, no receivers to throw to because Malik Neighbors is hurt, a running back room that is depleted and only has two guys at the current moment because you lost Cam Scadaboo. There is not very much working for them, not to mention the fact that defense that can't stop anything. He is in one of the worst situations at the current moment for a rookie quarterback and still has found ways to produce. And he has the overall mentality that I think reflects a lot of how people in the region around New York City, how they feel, how they want to feel confident. They want to feel expressive. People are rallying around him. They weren't doing this with Daniel Jones. I just think that when you finally feel like you have a kid in the room, you have to see it through. We're not talking about a player who is been at a Kenny Pickett level, who has struggled, and you're thinking, all right, maybe let's see what happens here. It's been volatile because he has been through a lot. He had really big games at the start. He has struggled recently because Mike Kafka has completely mishandled the play calling and how they're using him. To burn this thing down before the kid gets going and you trade him away and he goes on to work somewhere else, I think that would be completely devastating. To make a move like that for someone who is going to be a slightly above average starter when you already have a guy who is capable of becoming that and is already a year into progressing into his career, I think that would be completely misguided.
The tough part of this conversation is there's going to be a new coaching staff in New York, obviously, right after Brian Daboll was let go this season. They're going to have some input into this, Joe, right? And if it's an NFL guy currently, which it most likely will be, they're going to look back at their notes on Jaxson Dart coming out of the draft and say, I either liked this kid a lot or I didn't like this kid, right? And that's where a lot of determinations happen as far as, does the staff believe in this player? Because here's the problem that happens sometimes, Joe. This happens sometimes. Sometimes a coaching staff gets hired, a la the Tennessee Titans a couple years ago, and they convince themselves, you know what? Will Levis showed us some flashes as a rookie. He had a couple good games, including a 4-touchdown game, where they're going to say, you know what?
Dart's been better than Will Levis, man.
Stats, dude. They're pretty similar.
Forget the stats. I've watched both of them play.
Will Levis
was also throwing to DeAndre Hopkins.
They're pretty similar, man. They're pretty similar.
I don't agree with that at all. I completely disagree with that.
The stats in a vacuum are pretty similar. My overall point is, if the staff doesn't believe in Jaxson Dart, they don't believe in Jaxson Dart. Like that's point blank. And we don't know the answer to that yet. There's a possibility that Joe Shane says, I'm looking for a guy that wants to work with Jaxson Dart. That's a part of my criteria. But that's also flawed because Joe Shane could be out of a job sometime soon as well. So that should not be the overall point of the conversation. It should be about getting a guy in here that could save your job, a guy that can do a really good job. That's first and foremost. But overall, Joe, here's my baseline point here to this and why I believe this, that I would consider drafting a kid with the first overall pick if you have the first overall pick. If I threw Fernando Mendoza and I threw Dante Moore and I threw Jaxson Dart in a bucket in terms of how I evaluated them as quarterbacks, and I could even inject what I know of Jaxson Dart so far with the X amount of starts that he has in the NFL, Who would you draft first?
I would still take Mendoza, but here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
The separation is marginal. And to be perfectly clear here,
yeah,
I, going into the 2025 NFL draft, was not high on Jaxson Dart. And Jaxson Dart's performance altered my perspective because the one problem that I had with him is I did not think that he was a capable decision maker of evaluating a full field and to move off of an initial read. He was one of the worst quarterbacks this past year and in the past couple of drafts in college of navigating off of a primary read to a secondary read. He made bad decisions. He held the ball too long. He hesitated. Completely different transformation for the beginning of his time with the Giants. Since the Kafka transition, you see the kid starting to overthink things again because Kafka's a really, really, he's a dunce. He just has no idea what he's doing. But Ryan, the difference between them is so marginal that it's not worth making a move like that. I don't think that anyone is going to evaluate all three of those guys and go, man, Dante Moore or man, Fernando Mendoza is just so much better than Dart that we have to pass up on it. Here's the other thing too, though.
Yeah.
Whoever they hire ultimately, and this has been reported upon since they fired Daboll, even before they fired Daboll, all these anonymous coaches that have been spoken to and reached out to, they've been asked, how enticing is the Giants' job? All of them have said it's the best job out there. There's a young quarterback with elite weapons and a quality defensive core that if you tap into it, it could be immediately competitive. A lot of the reason why these anonymous coaches like the Giants' job is because of Jaxson Dart. So most realistically, whoever you hire isn't going to come at the sense of, I got to go get my guy. I think most of them are going to come in with the sense of, man, there's this kid that we can build around, and if we give him the right situation, he could end up being a great player.
And I'm sure that's probably what they will try to do. If you ask me today, what do I think they'll do? They'll probably roll with Jaxson Dart and they'll trade back. Like, that's probably what they will do. But do I think that there's credence to thinking about if it's a new staff that evaluates Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore and evaluates Jaxson Dart both from Ole Miss and what they know now already in the NFL, and they see him in person, all that type of stuff, and they evaluate all three of those players and say, who would I rather work with? I think there is some credence to saying a new coach needs their guy, because ultimately, with the rookie pay scale the way it is, Joe, while you don't want two first-round quarterbacks on your roster necessarily, it's not like you're paying Jaxson Dart big money like you were back in the day when you were paying like Sam Bradford, $50 million guaranteed as the number one draft pick. Like, it is different now. So you can afford to draft the quarterback number one, to have Jaxson Dart be the backup and to pay him a low first-round paycheck at the quarterback position, because ultimately backup quarterbacks get nice paydays in the NFL, and they are not the guy that just don't get scraps. If they're not the third offensive guard on a roster, for instance, right? Like, they matter so much that you're going to get a decent amount of money. So again, I think that there is some credence to getting an offensive, well, I don't think it has to be an offensive-minded head coach, getting a good head coach that you believe in and say, hey, we have these three guys that could potentially be on the table. One we already have, two guys that could be via the first overall selection. Which one do you believe in? And that's the answer in the end. If it's Fernando Mendoza, great. If it's Jaxson Dart, fine. If it's Dante Moore, fine. There's no wrong answer if the coach believes in them, but I do think that it would be silly and misguided to not at least consider them all. Consider all the options that are on the table.
Having the conversation is important, but the other layer that you're also, I think, removing from this too, what you can get in return for trading out of the first overall pick ultimately builds a better roster around Dart. Picking at that spot and trading Dart probably does not get you as much. I think that you would be able to, it's the mystery box fallacy that you could trick somebody into thinking, hey, like, I can go up and go and get my future starter instead of I've seen this kid play before. The value is just higher.
Well, let me.
I think that the amount of capital that you could end up getting, to find new offensive linemen, wide receivers, defensive backs that you need, this team lacks depth.
Right.
That's the biggest problem right now. They have very poor depth because Joe Shane did a terrible job on mid to late round picks. If you have more picks to go and get that depth, that then fixes the circumstance of your team.
Let me ask you,
and makes it easier for Dart to win.
Let me ask you one more question before we end this conversation, because obviously we see it a little bit differently, but it's totally fine. It's a healthy conversation. What if I told you, because the whole point of wanting to keep that pick and not draft a quarterback is you want to trade back, right? Like you don't want to sit at 1 and draft a wide receiver or Arvell Reese or whoever. Like you don't want to do that at number 1. But what if I told you, I guaranteed you, and I can't guarantee this, but let's say it's out there, that if you traded Jaxson Dart, you can get a first-round pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Would that change your opinion on this at all? If you could fetch an additional first for Jaxson Dart.
I don't think it would completely change my opinion. I think it would make the decision a little bit different because that's also what needs to be part of this. Is like if you're really going to go down this route, you need to find what the trade market is. If the trade market for someone moving up to your spot where you're picking is greater than sending away Jaxson Dart, we have seen that there's more significant value just in the NFL of building a better circumstance around a kid than drafting the better prospect.
Right.
I mean, like we talked about Jared Goff earlier. Jared Goff has made himself look better because he's on a good team. Caleb Williams is on a better team now, so he's playing better. Drake May is a little different because Drake May is such an elite player that he elevated the team around him. That alters the discussion. The best young quarterbacks that play better early on are the ones that have the good roster with the good coach. So I think that we would have to know exactly what the value is of that of trading Dart.
I think it almost comes down to, would you rather have Jaxson Dart and 2 first-round picks, or would you rather have Fernando Mendoza and 1 first-round pick? Like, what's the
Dart and 2 first-round picks?
Have that? Well, then there's your answer, right? Like, that's the teeter-totter conversation of like what side wins ultimately. If you'd rather have Jaxson Dart and 2 first-round picks, that ultimately wins. Or if you'd rather have Mendoza and 1 first-round pick if you trade Jaxson Dart.